I said, wow. Excellent.
So, good evening. This is Tuesday, December 8th. This is our public meeting on school start time. We've had a committee working on studying school start time for the past year or so. I'm going to introduce the committee, and they will make a presentation. Following the presentation, we'll give people a chance to ask questions or make comments. And at that time, I'll kind of go over the ground rules for making comments. So I'll introduce the committee at this time. The members of the committee are Deirdre Dalbert, Diane Lyons, and Laura Shulkin. They've been assisted by our superintendent of schools, Mr. Phelan, and they've also enlisted the help of many other individuals throughout the school district and community over many hours over the past year or so. So this is the result of what they've been doing so far. I'll just point out that, you know, this is a informational session. There's been no decisions made on school start time. So we're hoping to gather as much information from you tonight as we can. Please, if you have a question or comment, we want to hear it, you know, positive or negative. So, you know, feel free to make a comment after the presentation. So with that, go right ahead.
Okay, well, I'm Deirdre Dalbert. I'll make just a few remarks. We're going to walk you through this PowerPoint presentation, which covers the work we've done together as a small group, as an ad hoc committee. We formed about a year ago in the fall of 2014, and actually this was really inspired by parent input. At one of our first Coffee with the Board events last fall, someone came forward, presented a whole bunch of actually quite compelling research about the question of school start time and adolescent sleep, and that really started a process which is, as Mark Fleischer has already said, still ongoing. There are no conclusions that have been reached, and as you'll see, we're working through a lot of different scenarios, looking at a lot of different information, and collecting feedback very actively right now from all members of our community. So we want to thank you for taking the time to come out this evening and for sharing your thoughts with us. As I said, this process is underway, but truly what the starting place that we all are coming from is around the question of health and wellness. And there are a lot of considerations that come into play when you look at any sort of proposed change of a schedule that affects so many families, so many individuals. And we think it's really worth emphasizing right up front that what inspired us to begin this conversation is thinking about health and wellness benefits for our students. Okay, so why are we exploring this issue right now? This has come up well before even the 2000s. In the 90s, a number of school districts around the country began looking at the issue of school start time and optimizing student learning in terms of when the school day starts. So some of those districts went ahead and made changes in the 90s, and it's my understanding that right here in Rhinebeck, those conversations were taking place as well. They were inconclusive, and yet it seems as if a kind of critical mass has been reached in terms of the scientific community, medical research around sleep patterns in teenagers. And there, according to the National Sleep Foundation, there's also awareness that there's a kind of widespread chronic health problem that is prevalent amongst adolescents, which is sleep deprivation. Okay, so what are we talking about when we're talking about how much sleep students need? The fact of the matter is, at least according to the medical community, teens do need more sleep than we as adults do. On average, experts say students should be sleeping about 8.5 to 9.5 hours a night. We're going to be looking at some survey results asking students how many hours they are sleeping each night, and it has to be said, very few of them are sleeping 8.5 to 9.5 hours a night, and that's for a variety of reasons. Research suggests at the nationwide level, only about 2 out of 3 teenagers are actually getting what would be considered adequate sleep if this is the standard that we use, and on average, 7 hours appears to be the amount of sleep they are receiving. In the last 2 years, major nationwide organizations, first of all, the American Academy of Pediatrics in 2014, have come forward and made official recommendations. AAP has suggested that schools should align their schedules, the start time, to, quote, the biological sleep rhythms of adolescents, whose sleep-wake cycles begin to shift up to 2 hours later in puberty. What does that really mean? It has something to do with the secretion of melatonin and sleep cycles for adolescents, which makes it extremely difficult for teenagers to really feel that they're prepared to sleep, or in fact fall asleep, before 11 o'clock. And this research has been conducted not only in the United States, but across Europe, in South America, all over the globe, suggesting that this sleep phase cycle issue is at play when you're looking basically at students between ages 13 and 18, which pretty much comprehends all of our students in Buckley Middle School and in Rhinebeck High School. Okay, so researchers agree that it's difficult for students to fall asleep before 11 o'clock. So what we're looking at is a kind of problem of when does school start, when are we expecting students to rise, and when are students finding it naturally possible for them to go to sleep. Of course, there are a lot of complicating factors. We can get into talking about that in the question and answer period, such as use of social media, homework, busy work, and after-school schedules and the like. This summer, the Centers for Disease Control also declared insufficient sleep for adolescents, quote, a public health concern, which is best addressed by adopting later school start times. So we take this seriously. We take this seriously that recommendations from major medical associations and also the CDC have come out in the last 2 years recommending that school districts really look into how they plan time and the schedule for students in school. Now, what about us here in Rhinebeck? We have some very specific parameters, and before this group began to study the question of looking at the schedule, these parameters were made clear to us. And these are the parameters that are informing every option we're looking at. First of all, any recommendation that might come forward, and we want to stress might, we still don't know what the best option will be or could be, that any recommendation has to be cost neutral. We're in an extremely challenging fiscal climate. The prospect of adding to our budget in any way around changing school start time just doesn't seem realistic this year. Second of all, we want to maintain all extra and co-curricular programs for our students in the middle school and in the high school. We're going to show you statistics about the level of participation of our students in those programs, how robust they are, and how important they are. They're every bit as important to health and wellness of our student body as something like school start time. And thirdly, we all agree that whatever plan might come forward, it has to be viewed as a pilot program. We would need to study, we'd have to put in place assessment measures and study the success of any change, and this would be a 1-year pilot that we would be contemplating. Okay, so basically, we can't propose anything that doesn't meet these criteria. First of all, when we began to research our options, we realized there's a lot of sort of ambient noise about, what goes on in other schools. So my colleague Laura Schulkind was extremely assiduous in tracking down the bell schedules for all other Dutchess County school districts. And as you can see, there's a range of start times, right, between 7:45 and extremely challenging, I guess, what is that, 7:17 for the Wappinger students. But you can also see that there's a variance in the number of class periods in each of these districts, and the length of each period varies. And finally, something we've been really paying a lot of attention to now is how much time there is allowed for passing between each class. And we're really trying to look at whether or not that's something we could revisit in Rhinebeck. These are the bell schedules for Ulster, and if you look down here, it's Pullman and New Paltz, they're already starting at 8 o'clock. So some of the concerns we have about how we interface our schedule with the schedules of other schools around sports, for instance, was very helpful for us to begin to look at, what is the range of start times. Then we wanted to see how many students might be impacted if there was any change to when the school day ends or begins. So we gathered information with the help of our principals around how many students participate in extracurricular programming, both before and after school. So at Chancellor, you see there's about 350 participants in those programs out of an enrollment of 444. At Buckley Middle School, enrollment 249. We see a kind of participation of around approximately 90 spread across these clubs. And in the high school, with an enrollment of 405, we see around 250 students. And this isn't unique student participants, and some students, of course, participate in more than one club. Nonetheless, it was particularly interesting as to see how robust this programming is and how important it is to the students' experience of this district. Then we also looked, thanks to Mr. Boucher, we were able to look at the levels of participation after school sports. And again, really significant numbers of participants, right? If you look at just the recent fall sports season, about 46% of our students were participating in some sporting activity. You can see the figures also for obviously in the winter, the numbers are a little bit lower, but it goes up again in the spring. So between clubs and athletics, we clearly have a very involved student body, and we don't want to lose any of that. Then we interviewed a number of different people. So clearly we had to speak with the principals of all the buildings. We had to speak to Mr. Boucher to understand how any proposed change might impact scheduling of athletic contests. We spoke with the business office to explore what the implications would be for our bus schedules or how we think about busing. We've talked with groups of teachers. We've conducted surveys of teachers, parents, and students most recently. We spoke with the Health and Wellness Committee to get their input. The question was brought by principals back to the building level planning teams to get input from teachers and parents in that forum. Of course, obviously, we also consulted the research that's come out of those three major associations I've already cited. And I'm going to turn this over now to Joe Phelan to talk about the different possibilities or scenarios.
Thank you, Deirdre. So Deirdre's given you the context for our work up to this point, and I just would want to make one comment before I start to step you through these options. Even though the focus of such an initiative is aimed towards addressing mental emotional health of our adolescents, one thing we quickly discovered as we started talking to parents, staff members, is that something we cannot be oblivious to, and that's the fact that any change in the schedule will impact not only secondary students but elementary students as well. In some school districts, for example, Glens Falls City School District north of Albany recently went to a later start time for their high school students, but they're a walking district because they're a city district. They don't bus their students. All of their schools start at different times anyway, and they're not dependent on any kind of cooperative busing. So they didn't have the challenges that we would have in a school district like ours, where virtually all of our students are bused, middle school and high school on the same bus, elementary on another bus currently. So there are challenges, and if we were to change start times at the middle school, high school, it would, in some scenarios, impact elementary school start times, end times. So I just want you to be aware of the fact that pretty soon into this process, we discovered that we've got to also be concerned about teacher, parent, and student impact at our elementary school as well as at our middle school and our high school. Okay, so in an effort not to be cute but to be descriptive, we've identified 5 different options. I will also say, in the interest of full disclosure, that not all of those 5 options are cost neutral. But we felt an obligation to the board, as long as we were doing this work, to put all of the options on the table so that the board had the full range of options, cost neutral or not. So the single trip possibility would mean putting all students on the same bus run. Everybody comes in at the same time, everybody goes home at the same time. I forgot one thing I wanted to mention. There is not one of these options that is not without the necessity to do things differently. That's a given. And they all will have an impact on kids. And there are pros and there are cons to all these options. So I just wanted to kind of forecast that for you right off the bat. Okay. So how would we do it if we went to a single trip? All K-12 students would ride in the same bus. Middle school, high school students would arrive at this building around 8 a.m. Chancellor students, the buses would then take the students to Chancellor and drop them off there, so they would get there approximately 8:15. What would the impact be on the BMS RHS schedule? First period would begin at 8 a.m. Currently, it begins at 7:30 a.m. Ninth period would end at 2:46 p.m. Currently, it ends at 2:16 p.m. So shifts it, in this scenario, half an hour. Bus would depart here with our middle school, high school students, approximately 2:56 p.m. After-school clubs and extra help would meet until 3:40 p.m. Athletic buses could depart as early as 3 p.m., considering a 2:46 dismissal here. And after-school bus would depart about 3:46 p.m. What would be the impact on the CLS schedule? CLS classes would begin at 8:15. Currently, they begin at 8:55. Classes at CLS would end at 2:35 p.m. The bus would depart approximately 2:45 p.m. or thereabouts. What would it cost? This is not a cost-neutral scenario. Taking into account the need for approximately 10 extra buses and also anticipating a concern from parents about elementary and secondary students riding on the same bus, we factored in the possible need for bus monitors. We're looking at a cost range of this option between $613,000 and $1,100,000. It's a pretty heavy financial lift, but it is what it is. Let's go to the next scenario. Oh, no, let's look at the pros and cons. Single start time and end time for all students as a pro. We would be able to maintain all clubs and after-school help. A positive would be CLS students would begin their day earlier, aligning with their sleep patterns. We heard a lot from the elementary teachers in our district that the school day is already longer than they'd like to see it, that the elementary kids are running out of gas towards the end of the current school day, and a number of them felt that an earlier start time for elementary students would be a benefit for them. The cons, you can see there, the total cost. There is also, not just in Rhinebeck or in Dutchess County, but nationally, there's a bus driver shortage. The option of getting an additional 10 bus drivers may be just not feasible for us. or for any school district for that matter. It would also negatively impact school enrichment transportation for Chancellor students. Currently, many of their enrichment programs are before school. They ride in on the high school bus and then get dropped off at Chancellor. Well, they'd be only a 15-minute lag time between secondary start time and elementary start time, so that wouldn't be able to happen. Okay, we'll take a look at the second option, which is the so-called flip-flop option. And how would we do it? Well, let's take a look. In the flip-flop, CLS students would come in earlier and secondary students would come later, thus the flip-flop. CLS students would arrive at the elementary school for, say, a 7:30 a.m. start. All middle school and high school students would ride the second bus run of the day and arrive here at Chancellor, at Bulkley and the high school at approximately 8:55, basically flipping the start times for both groups. We were also looking at, in order to shave some time from the end of the day, Deirdre mentioned a little earlier, we're looking at the possibility of decreasing passing time at the high school from 4 minutes to 3 minutes. It saves, 7 or 8 minutes of passing time, but that's 7 or 8 minutes we'll take when if we're trying to make any plan work. The effect on the Chancellor schedule would begin classes around 7:30, end classes at Chancellor around 1:50 p.m., and their bus would depart around 2:05 p.m. The effect on the middle school, high school schedule, first period here would begin at 8:55 p.m., ninth period would end at 3:41 p.m., middle school, high school bus students would depart approximately 3:51 p.m. After school clubs and extra help would meet until 4:41 p.m. You can see how this is pushing later into the afternoon. Athletic buses wouldn't be able to depart until around 3:56 p.m., which begins to become problematic for that part of our program. And after school bus depart at 4:50 p.m. Okay, what would it cost? We'd need approximately 4 after-school buses to bring home secondary students who stayed late. The approximate cost between $21,000 and $29,000 per year. Pros, elementary and secondary students would begin classes at the hours when they are most awake. Cons, an additional financial burden, though certainly less than the last option. And another con would be athletes at away games would have to potentially leave early, thus missing their ninth period class, which kind of starts to defeat the purpose of having them go that late and having to leave class early. A recent experiment in this at Poughkeepsie High School, albeit for a totally different reason than what we're looking at, was scuttled after 1 year because so many kids had to leave. They changed pushed the start time back later because so many kids were missing first period class, and the unintended consequence was they had about as many kids missing ninth period class. So they went back to the way they had done it previously. Although the dynamic there was totally different, and I'll talk to you offline about that sometime, but it really does not, it's not our issue here at Rhinebeck. Okay. During our investigation of these various options, all of the committee members discussed kind of a hybrid of the flip-flop option and also a shift option. I'll go through it with you as quickly as I can. It combines some of the benefits of both, but it also combines some of the downsides of both. In this scenario, all Chancellor students would ride the first bus run of the day. They would get to the elementary school at approximately 7 a.m. All middle school, high school students would ride the second bus run, would arrive at this campus at about 8:15 a.m. Again, we would propose to decrease the passing times to 3 minutes from 4. The effect on the chancellor's schedule: first period beginning at 7 a.m., final classes ending at 1:20 p.m., chancellor buses leaving about 1:35 p.m. In terms of the middle school, high school schedule, first period beginning at 8:15 a.m., ninth period ending around 2:53 p.m., the bus departing around 3:03 p.m., after-school clubs and extra help would meet until about 3:53 p.m. Athletic buses would still probably be able to get out of here around 3 p.m. After-school buses would depart at 4. What would it cost? Again, after-school buses, we need 4 of them. The same 21 to 29K cost potentially. It's really just a variation on a theme that occurred to us as we were working through these various scenarios. Pros, the school schedule would mirror the sleep cycles for elementary and secondary students. CLS early start would optimize the younger students' learning time. Middle school, high school would gain additional sleep time, optimizing their learning. Cons, there's a price tag. Would again eliminate before-school enrichment for chancellor students because of the transportation issue, and may also impact CLS electives. The fourth option we looked at was a 30-minute shift, which you've kind of seen in the last scenario, but all we would do would be shift. Middle school, high school would ride the first bus run, arrive here around 8 a.m. Chancellor students would ride the second bus run, arrive at Chancellor about 9:02 a.m. Originally, we were looking at an arrival time about 10 after 9, but if we shaved the passing times, we could pick up 7 or 8 minutes there. Backs that off a little bit. What would happen at middle school, high school? Begin at 8 a.m., ninth period ending at 2:46 p.m., buses departing at 2:46 p.m., buses departing at 2:56 p.m., after-school clubs and extra help meeting until 3:30, athletic buses again departing around 3 p.m., after-school bus departing from Chancellor around 3:45 p.m. Primarily just that half an hour shift later at both, at the high school, middle school, and less than that at Chancellor. There's the Chancellor schedule. Instead of 8:55 a.m. start, it'd be a 9:02 a.m. start. Classes would end at 3:22 as opposed to the current 3:15. Chancellor bus students would depart at 3:37 as opposed to 3:30, and before school programs would begin at 8:15. Right now they start around 7:30 or thereabouts. No additional cost for this. This is a cost-neutral option. Okay, pros. Middle school, high school students would gain 30 minutes extra sleep, improving health and wellness. Chancellor early morning programs would not be affected. Middle school first period lunch would push from 11 to 10:30.
No,
No, other way around.
2:11 from
2:11.
10:30.
2:11 from 10:30. Okay, thank you.
Right.
Cons, Chancellor students would be pushed slightly later in the day, 5 to 7 minutes later. Middle school, high school club meeting time could be shortened by a bus departure at 3 p.m. final option is to maintain the status quo. Maintain what we do now. And I've been through most of this data in describing the other options. And nothing new here that I haven't already mentioned to you. At either school, no cost option. Pros, it's easy. You don't have to do anything except maintain the status quo. The con is that adolescents don't gain additional sleep time, so that's a con for this option. And I think where we had your...
Yeah, I just have a few more things to share with you about the preliminary findings of our surveys that we've conducted. So you all should have received a link for a SurveyMonkey survey for parents in the community, and actually we're really pleased that we got about a 51.5% response rate to that, which actually is really good because other surveys that we've conducted have not necessarily elicited that much feedback. So, and I should say that after we have this conversation, we're going to continue and come back to you and survey once again, because it's our sense that we would like to budge that number of people who are still kind of in the undecided category, one way or the other, and we recognize that this was kind of a first reading of where the parent community is. So as you can see, as of our first administering of a survey, 66% of parents surveyed believed that having some change in the school start time would have a positive impact on students. 21% thought it would be negative, and 13% was undecided. Okay, and then we turned to our teachers. And as you'll see here, there's actually quite a discrepancy between the concerns that were expressed by teachers at Chancellor, and I think that was borne out also in the kind of discussions that took place between members of this committee and teachers. And I think Joe's done a good job already of characterizing where that concern comes from. The school day feels late already for young children. The idea of possibly having that school day go later is not attractive, and as you can see with the Chancellor teachers, 72% believe that pushing the elementary school day later would have a negative impact. 28% thought perhaps negligible. No one thought it would have a positive impact. Our survey of the middle school and high school teachers thought about 44% believed it would have positive impact. 50% were not convinced it would really have any impact at all. So that's, and 6% believed there would be a negative impact. So we have a real asymmetry in the feedback we're getting at this point from our teachers. And we need to keep talking with teachers to continue to find good solutions, right, to the experience, the very different experience that they're articulating for us. And then this is the feedback from students. We have an 80% respondent rate from the middle school, which is great. And as you can see, the positives were 59% amongst the middle school students, negligible impact 6%, and negative impact 35%, so that's a higher rate of sort of concern about what a change might signify from what we see amongst our high school students, where 71% believed it would have a positive impact, 6% negligible, and 23% negative impact. So we again sort of see some difference there between our younger students and our older students, which is interesting given what the research suggests too about how strong the effects might be the older an adolescent becomes in terms of this problem with disruption of sleep patterns. Okay, so again, this is all of the figures sort of lined up in terms of parent response, teacher response broken out between the two campuses, and student response. And here, if you aggregate student response, you'll see grades 6 through 12, that the reading right now is about 66% believe it would have a positive impact, 6% believe it is negligible or they are undecided, and 28% see it as having a negative impact. That's our, like I said, that's our first kind of reading of the community. And as you can see, different members of our community are coming from very different places. So that's important to us, and that's also why it's really great to see such a good turnout tonight, so we can learn more from your perspective. I do just want to emphasize once again that what's motivating this, is a concern for the health, the wellness, and the functioning of our students in an academic environment. That really, as we get into very fine distinctions around when the day might begin and when the day might end, that's what's driving us. That's our concern. So, at this point, we want to open the floor for public comment. I believe our president will lay out the guidelines for that.
Okay, so we're going to have an opportunity for a public comment. I just want to remind everyone that the board has a full board meeting after this session, so we're going to try to limit the amount of time that we have for comments, but we will try to take as many questions or as many comments as possible. If you have a question, we're going to have some index cards up here. They're already. Do you have the index cards? All right, we're going to be giving out index cards. If you have a question, write your question on the card, and we will try to address it. You can also email your questions to us, but at any rate, so here are the guidelines for public comment. This is part of board policy. So if you wish to speak, please raise your hand. I will call on you, and I would ask that you approach the mic so that your voice can be heard for the recorded version of the meeting, which will be available on YouTube later on. I'd ask that you give your name and where you reside. If you could please limit your comment to 5 minutes, which hopefully your comments will be less than that, but we're going to limit everybody to 5 minutes. If you wish to make a second comment later on, please give everybody else an opportunity to make first comment before you raise your hand again to make a second one. Hopefully we'll have time for second comments, but we'll have to see how far we get. I'd ask that people who are making comments, if the others could please not interrupt. We want to keep the meeting moving, and hopefully we can address your comments or listen to your comments, and proceed on to our meeting that's following this. All right. So please raise your hand if you'd like to make a comment. First hand in the back.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, my name is Valerie LaRose, and I live at 2 Mill Road here in Rhinebeck. I have a son who's in 2nd grade at Chancellor. I'm actually a teacher in the Wappinger Central School. I have to be at Ketchum every morning at 7 a.m. for my students to arrive at 7:15. I really am grateful that I live in a community where this is an important issue and it's being spoken about openly in this way. I certainly do respect the CDC and their recommendations to help our students and their well-being and their health. But I really think that a school district to prescribe the school start times is a little beyond the scope. We can't be 100% sure that just because the school day begins later, that students will actually be sleeping for that time. How are we to know that they don't take that time and really just use it as a larger cushion for whatever activities they are doing during their evening hours? So I really think it's a little bit beyond the scope of what a school district can sort of figure out in terms of students and their behaviors and their family situations. My son goes to before school care, and I really would not prefer for him to be in before-school care longer than necessary. That's why I'm really in favor of not changing the school day at all. I'm able to pick him up every day as my schedule allows, and I am grateful for that. And I really think that it's not surprising that these survey numbers are what they are. Of course, high school students would only see it as a positive if they would get to begin the school day at a later time. I don't think that that's anything that surprises anyone. Some of these numbers need to be taken a look at with a very clear view of who those respondents are. Please take into consideration parents and their responsibilities. Certainly, we're talking about students and their welfare and their health, but we also have a huge stakeholder that we're not discussing, and that's parents. Parents, especially working parents in this community, I believe are a sort of underrepresented voice, and we need to make sure that we hear those working parents and that we can't just simply start school earlier or start school later without really considering the parents as a really important stakeholder. So I hope the board certainly takes all of these things into consideration, including the cost of before-school care and after-school care for working parents in this community, as well as taking a real hard look at who those respondents in those surveys are. And of course, theoretically, when you're filling out a survey, everyone wants the best for their child, so people will respond in a particular way, theoretically. But when it comes time to make the actual decision, the reality for some of these parents and these respondents might be a little different. Thank you.
Thank you. Someone else?
Good evening. My name is Nancy Erlanker. I live in Rhinebeck, New York. I'm the mother of a 9th grader and an 11th grader. I'm here to speak as their mother, but I also have been in Rhinebeck working for 26 years. According to Dr. Owens from the AAP, chronic sleep loss in children and adolescents is one of the most common and easily fixable public issues in the United States today. With that in mind, I wish to thank our board for investigating our options in Rhinebeck. While change can be uncomfortable for everyone, I'm hopeful we'll stay focused on what's best for the children. I want to commend the subcommittee members on a comprehensive review of research, for including all stakeholders in the process, and for exploring what options Rhinebeck might institute that benefits the students while being fiscally responsible for the community. While it is impossible to predict local outcomes, the shift possibility offers multiple benefits. As the AAP states, getting enough sleep improves our youngsters' health, grades, standardized test scores, and quality of life, while reducing health risks and auto accidents. The shift is a way for our children to gain sleep time. The shift would not raise our budget and would have a minimal impact on our extracurricular activities. Lastly, I wish to respectfully remind all of us that in order to savor the benefits of any possibility, including the shift possibility, as parents, we need to encourage our children to develop healthy sleep habits, and we need to enforce media curfews, just as the AAP recommends.
Thank you. Who's next?
My name is Julia Eilenberg. I'm a resident of Rhinebeck. I live on Delano Drive. I have 3 children who are high school students at Rhinebeck High School, who are all subject to the unmerciful early start time. And I'm also a practicing psychiatrist with 25 years of academic and clinical experience treating teenagers and young adults. I would like to express profound gratitude to the board for taking on this issue and for doing such a comprehensive and thoughtful review of all of the factors involved. I'd also like to add to the opinion that I'm about to state that I am a working parent and that my kids have gone through this district starting as kindergartners or even earlier as preschoolers. And so I feel that I'm well acquainted with the challenges for working parents that are presented by any of the scenarios that have been presented. I have a lot that I could say about this. I've researched the topic extensively and would be happy to be called upon to share with some of the information that may be useful to other parents in trying to figure out how to support the board's recommendations, or I guess you're not making recommendations, but how to support making whatever changes are felt to be necessary and important for the success and wellness of the older students in this district. I would like to just right now narrowly address one point that's already been raised, which is a common misunderstanding of what the science of sleep has shown us about teenagers. The issue of a later start time is recommended not just as a means of getting teenagers more sleep. It is true that most teenagers who attend schools are sleep deprived, that they are falling short at least on a Monday through Friday schedule or Sunday through Thursday night schedule of the recommended and necessary 8.5 to 9.5 hours of sleep. But that's only one aspect of the sleep physiology. The other that a later start time takes into account. The other, which is actually more physiologically significant, speaks to the circadian rhythms of teenagers. And anyone who's either been a teenager or has a teenager, which probably accounts for all of us, can readily apprehend this experientially, that there was a time in your life, or there is a time in the life of current teenagers where the desire to go to bed switches to a later time, and the tendency to sleep is later, and then it changes again. And many of us are at a different phase of life where we're going to bed earlier, and I'm grateful to be awake right now. But this is the more important point than the one about how many hours of sleep teenagers are getting, because there's nothing you can do to get a teenager to be tired, to be getting into bed earlier. They're physiologically wired to stay up for all kinds of interesting reasons. We could have an interesting bioanthropologic discussion about why we've evolved this way. But there's important measures that Nancy Erlanger referred to that I agree with, that we impose in our house around cell phone curfews and getting homework done earlier, et cetera. But none of that addresses the circadian demand for the kids to be in bed, sleeping, up until, well, as late as possible. And if there's any other points of information that I can offer, I would be glad to be questioned. Thank you.
Would like to be next?
Hi, I'm Paul Slayton, town of Rhinebeck, father of 2 graduates from Rhinebeck High School. In full disclosure, I used to sit up there. I just want to applaud the whole board for tackling this issue, and especially the committee and the administrators for pursuing it in the thorough manner that you have. I would say that Rhinebeck's always been a leader in tackling tough issues, and especially staying focused on student-centered issues and the goals of improving, students' well-being and their performance here in school. And I just encourage you not to let a pursuit of the perfect be the enemy of the good enough. And so I would say any change that pushes the needle forward on a positive direction for students and student learning is a good change. And I love the fact that you've already decided, you've already laid out, let's pilot it for a year and study it again and think about it again. So I really applaud what you're doing, and I think it's a great thing. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name's Emily Haupt. I live in the Red Hook Central School District. So I have 2 children in the Red Hook Central School District, 8 years apart, a 4th grader and a senior. And Red Hook has been grappling with this problem, or ideas as well. And our school start time at the high school starts, I believe, at 7:45. And the elementary school starts at 9 o'clock. So we're still considering pushing back the high school start time. But my question is, and it's really genuinely a question, our schools are intertwined, all in the region, because of sports and lots of other reasons. And I'm wondering why this isn't a conversation that's led by BOCES, and that it's not a regional conversation. Because if Red Hook pushes back our start time at the high school 30 minutes, we're all just grappling with the same issue. So my question is there a conversation that's led by BOCES? Has there been any kind of, discussion about, gosh, we're all in the same region, we're all rubbing shoulders?
I'll address that. Last year, when we first started looking at this topic, as did Red Hook, the county school superintendents, Dutchess County school superintendents, did have a conversation about this topic. And in fact, we brought in the consultant who addressed the Rhinebeck board, Susie Button, spoke to...
Red Hook board.
I'm sorry, I'm getting my Red Hooks and my Rhinebecks confused here. We brought Susie Button in to speak with the county superintendent. So there were at least 2 meetings. Again, 2 meetings is not anywhere near the kind of study that we put into this, or perhaps that Red Hook has. So there was a conversation at the county level as to whether BOCES is leading that or not. I'm not in a position to express an opinion on that. We had that conversation. I suspect what happened is everybody went back to their respective school districts and their respective boards and their respective situations and had some level of conversation, and in some districts that conversation has gone further than others. And I don't think that's a lack at the BOCES level in coordinating anything. I think it's an individual communities and boards decision that we're not ready for that now, or we're not interested in that now, or we don't think it's a good idea for us. So, I mean, again, I could throw out at least a dozen reasons that a board and or a community might want to say, we're not interested. Would this entire thing be infinitely easier if everybody was doing it? Sure. But, you don't always get where you want to get for your kids by doing anything, something that's, if we were looking for the easiest solution, we just fold up the tent right now and we're done. Because we can do this for any number of years further. So I think, we're maybe looking at the challenge of studying this and taking the pulse of the community more so than other school districts have, but I don't want to pass judgment on them because they may have other factors in play that I wouldn't even know about. The other thing I'd mention, if we're looking at things like athletics, it goes far beyond Dutchess County. I mean, we place schools in Sullivan County, in Ulster County, in Orange County. So now you're talking about trying to get 50 school districts to be on the same page. Not saying it's impossible, but that's a heavy lift. So that's just a little bit of the background in terms of the, the county-wide and the regional discussion on this topic. I hope I answered your question. Sure.
Someone else? Sir?
Promised myself I was going to sit there quiet and just listen. Richard Murray, I live on Württemberg Road. I have a 5-year-old kindergartner, CLS, and I have a 12-year-old in BMS. I've worked with a number of the girls over the year playing soccer. My wife and I coached a soccer team, so I've watched them grow, and certainly there are differences, and I just want to say, hey, I appreciate all the effort that you're putting into this. I think it's great. I came here initially thinking, no, this is too crazy. But you threw an option up there that I thought was very attractive, and that was the swap. Just flip the 2 schools. My concerns to do a shift with the time are very simple. Many of us have to go to work. I can't call my boss and say, yeah, they changed the start time. I'll be in at 9:30. It doesn't work. And we have a massive community out here. Only a small portion of them are here tonight, but they're out there. A lot of them are still working. A lot of them are very tired because they left the house at 6:30 this morning. Not everyone has the luxury to be that flexible. I work for myself, so I do have a little bit of flexibility. I put my boy on the bus at 8:30 in the morning. At 9 o'clock, my phone starts ringing. It doesn't stop. It doesn't stop for a couple hours. I just ignore people trying to beep in sometimes because I have to, just to focus. But at 9 o'clock, people know that I'm working. For me to say, I'm going to start work at 9:30 from now on, would not go over very well for my clients. A couple other small points. I'm not quite sure exactly how sleep deprivation is defined, but I know we're focused on the kids, but we're all families here. We have husbands, wives, children, little kids, big kids. Has there been consideration into educating our community, educating our parents as to sleep times for kids, what's appropriate, what time they should go to bed, what time they should get up to have a nice transition into their day? Over the past 15 years, our kids have become so active. They don't just go to school, they come home. Your numbers that you put up there were amazing. 46%, was it, of the high school kids participated in sports? I think that's wonderful. Those same 46%, I can guarantee 50% of those are doing dance and acrobatics and ballet and vocals. They're involved in a lot of things. How much is too much? How far do we push our kids, especially at an age where they're going through growth changes and emotional, they're a basket. Our job as parents is to keep an eye on them and guide them. If you told me that I could sleep in tomorrow morning, Saturday morning, guess what? Friday night, I'm going to stay up late and have fun. I'm going to watch an extra movie. I'm going to go out with some friends. The whole shifting a half an hour, okay. I have yet to read any of the studies, and everyone has an opinion, but it's not that simple just to shift the times. And I certainly hope that you put the families very high on the list in determining to do a shift. The impact would be quite devastating to some families, whether or not they have to incur extra expenses in the morning to have someone else watch their kids, whatever it is. But please consider that heavily. Thank you very much for your time.
Someone else? Yes, sir.
Is it okay to ask some questions for point of information? Just a few questions.
We just make sure that we have no other comments, because I want to make sure everyone has a chance. And if not, then we'll take a couple of questions.
Hi, I'm Pat Sexton. I live in Rhinebeck, and I have a daughter in high school and a son who has graduated from here. And it's really interesting to listen to what change does to a community. And it's also really important to understand what leadership does for a community. And I think part of the push-pull here and the numbers, and that they're not all in the exact same row, speaks to how we foment change. And as much as this is going to be a challenge to parents, and as much as this is going to be a challenge for teachers, as much as it's going to be a challenge for everybody, I think the leadership of what's being demonstrated here is one of the most important things we're seeing. Because that kind of leadership from this kind of district could really push people to a new place, to a new consideration. Because, Mr. Murray, our kids have 9 clients a day, every day, asking for homework. They put in 7 hours here. They go home, they put in another 3 to 4 to 5 hours, depending on what's going on in their lives. I think that giving them a chance to work with their biology in the best possible way is a really important consideration. And for the Chancellor kids to have a 15-minute push forward, and for the middle school and high school kids to have a little extra half hour, I think that's a really amazing compromise and an amazing place for people to come to school in the daylight and to know that they've been thought about, and that the leadership is there and really looking for solutions. So thank you so much for your time and everything you're putting into this, and I hope we all have a happy conclusion. Thank you.
Anyone else like to make a comment? Okay, sir, if you, just for points of clarification, I guess.
Yeah, inquiry, mainly.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Greg Hudson with the River Chronicle. The board has not made any particular recommendation as to a start time change, but are the members of the subcommittee of a particular opinion that any one of the proposed options you have placed is the most beneficial to as many students as possible at this time?
I'm looking at my colleagues because I was just elected to do the PowerPoint. I don't feel I should be the voice of everything that the subcommittee's doing.
I'll take this one. I think that's okay. Just for point of clarity, the flip-flop shift recommendation or option that you saw up there was born 2 weeks ago. So to say that the subcommittee is leaning one way or the other right now is a little premature, because as we continue to gather information from parents and teachers and the broader school community, we're adapting our opinions and the options. So tonight is really sort of our first blush at what we've done, and in gathering feedback from everybody in this room and hopefully beyond, we'll be able to make better and more informed recommendations. So no, I don't think we're quite there.
Okay. Secondary question, and that's all I have, is in the event that there is a start time change which results in the elementary schools beginning at an earlier time, is the school board going to take into account any possibilities that may require additional after-school care for children who may now be getting out of work in a time in the afternoon where parents aren't available to provide them care at home?
Well, I'll just say, as a matter of fact, that the school district does not currently provide after-school or before-school daycare for any students. We do host a before and after-school program run by a local not-for-profit. Many of our parents currently take advantage of that. But there's a cost to that. I mean, I'm not trying to say that it isn't, and it may in fact be an imposition currently on some parents who may not have the means. Whether we would continue to allow that kind of a program to happen, I have no reason to think that we would discontinue that. None of the options that you saw up there involved us building money into our budget to provide taxpayer-funded daycare, and I haven't heard that come up at any of the discussions here. So at this point, I think I can respond that there are no plans to do that at this moment.
But you would, at this time, be wanting to continue your relationship with the not-for-profit that hosts that are available?
What I said was that I can see no reason now, based on a fairly lengthy experience with hosting them, to say, well, no, we'll have to stop doing that. If there's a need and parents are interested in that service and we have the space available and we have a great relationship with them, I can't see any reason, as I sit here this evening, to say we discontinue that for any reason.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right.
So we're done, right?
So I think we're going to conclude the information session, and we're going to proceed with our board meeting.
If anybody has any cards with questions on them, please be sure you leave them up here on your way out, and we'll do our best to respond to them. Any questions we get, we'll post the answers on our website as well.
Just a quick question. Will those slides be available?
Yeah, we'll put those on our website as well.
Excellent.